Unfortunately, your DNA doesn't catch up as fast as sociology. So
Correct.
it's kind of like diabetes, you know? You girls basically all have sexual diabetes because we love sugar because we're hardwired because that helped us survive. But now sugar will kill you because it's in cake form. And that's just the sexual version of cake.
Hey, what's up, guys? Today we have a new channel that I've never responded to before. It's the Real Femsapien. Now, I had a pleasure of following her before she blew up, but she went viral and was shared by so many famous celebrities. Even Joe Rogan talked about it, about how she's submissive to her husband. But before that, she was already making this content. So shouts out to her for staying strong and true and getting to the point she's at. But today I'm gonna go over some clips from her channel because she makes some good points, and we'll talk about two different topics. One's gonna be about the evolutionary psychology of how dating and just interactions between men and women are going, as well as fitness and health, something I have a big background in as well. So as always, we're gonna break this down using science and psychology. With that being said, let's get into it.
I get it. The heart wants what it wants. Back in the day, this was probably great for survival. Those, like, you know, the playboy types, the rough mountain man types. Like Cappy said, they were great for you. But unfortunately, your DNA doesn't catch up as fast as sociology. So
Correct.
it's kind of like diabetes, you know? You girls basically all have sexual diabetes because we love sugar because we're hardwired because that helped us survive. But now sugar will kill you because it's in cake form. And that's just the sexual version of cake.
So while this clip was short and straight to the point, he made some very interesting statements. Now, he used the term emotional diabetes. Now, if you understand how diabetes works, it's when your body's not producing enough insulin by itself, because usually if it's not regular through your genetics, type 1, it's type 2, which means you've gotten to this point through bad and unhealthy choices, usually eating too much sugary foods. But if you eat so much, it throws off the balance of how your body responds to the sugar, and insulin doesn't get made enough or at all. So using that same premise with emotions, it's kind of the same. We've gotten to the point where we want it so much that it doesn't really do the same thing that it used to. He brings up things in ancient times, and I talk about this all the time with my concepts like there's no more saber-toothed tigers, how back then it made sense for the big bad boy, because when you think about it, in ancient times there was a lot that could kill us. It could have been an animal we're hunting. It could have been an animal just preying on us. It could have been a neighboring tribe. It could have been someone within the tribe that didn't like you. Anything and everything was dangerous. So being hyper masculine, hyper aggressive, which is dominated and promoted by testosterone, the male sexual hormone, you can see why this made sense, because if I'm more aggressive, that woman can ensure that if things went down, I probably could hold down the fort and make sure she is safe as well as our offspring. Now, if you fast forward to now, since there's no more saber-toothed tigers, this may not be as needed because we live in pretty civilized times. If I walk outside right now, for the most part, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be protected. And in even the worst case scenarios and the worst areas, it's still not likely I'm going to be attacked. It could happen. And also in technology wise with cars, things like that. So it's a possibility that there's danger lurking outside. But for the most part, I'm going to be okay. So the need for these big hyper aggressive men don't really play as much role in society, because if I get into an altercation with someone outside, I'm not gonna just try to beat them up. It could get to that point, but more than likely it's gonna end badly, either physically or legally, and I'll go to jail, or both of us, and both our lives are ruined to some extent. But the thing is, I use a term that I coined myself called financial masculinity. Because if you take people like, say, Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, they're not most physically imposing people. You don't think heartless, ruthless, manly men. They may not be like pushovers, but the point is, that's not what comes to mind from a physical standpoint, evolutionary speaking. If they were walking down the street and you didn't know who they were, and you didn't know they had billions of dollars, what really power do they have? In ancient times, there was, status, resources, but not to the extent. You wouldn't see a disparity as you do in modern times through billionaires and millionaires and other wealthy people. So only thing they really had back then was to be aggressive, was to take the resources, was to be hyper masculine. But now we don't need that as much. But guess what? That financial masculinity, that's what we want. Because if I can go buy things and be resourceful and take care of my family through that means, I can do my job. But we haven't evolved that much. We're still using the same software. Yeah, it might have been a few updates, but we're still acting on those instincts from those ancient times. So the bad boys, the big aggressive guys, still gets a lot of the women going. And this is why we see this need for that attention, for that hyper masculinity, that edge, as they call it, or some call it swag, whatever it may be. This is something we still long for, and it's probably not going to change anytime soon. But since society has kind of superseded our biology, and biology still is in the foot race trying to catch up, it might still be that disparity.
Of course, you just want to have a good time and you want to eat. But if you are not physically active, it's too easy to put on the weight. And you'll see as you get older, as a woman, you're looking around at your female family members too, and you're also friends of family, and you're seeing how the poor nutrition habits, they do lead to chronic illnesses and chronic disease. And you want to tell them one-on-one, hey, I'm worried about your health, but then they're ready to swing at you. So you just keep it to yourself.
So a lot of times when people have issues with health or weight, things of that nature, it's because of behaviors. A lot of times we think, oh, if I just had this magic cure-all, I'll be able to overcome my struggles. But most of the time, people know what they're doing wrong. They know what they need to do. But in the brain, we have to be wired to want to change. There's something called the stages of change, and there's 5 stages: the pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance stage. Now, the reason I bring this up because a lot of times people, when they want to change, they're in the contemplative, meaning they know there's something that need to be changed, but they're not physically or mentally ready to do it. But even worse, sometimes people are in the pre-contemplative. That means you don't even know you need to change. You might think you're okay, but all the signs are pointing towards your weight is not good, or your blood pressure, whatever it is. You're not aware of it because it's not a big issue, or you are aware of it, but it's very low on your priorities. A lot of people have trouble getting out of the pre-contemplative to the contemplative. But once you get to the preparation, this means, okay, I'm looking into different health habits, recipes, nutrition coaches, fitness trainers, gyms. I'm taking the steps. Now, the action stage, that means you've done it, but you haven't done it more than 6 months. I mean, you haven't sustained the behavior. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, I've been working out the last 3 weeks. That's great. You're taking the steps, but it doesn't get you there. Now, the last stage is the maintenance. This is action stage post 6 months, meaning you sustain this behavior. But can you backtrack? Of course, the relapse can happen. Now, if you relapse, just know, where did I go wrong? What happened? If you know there's times you're gonna have to ease off the diet or the workout, plan that into your routine, because instead of trying to force yourself when you know you have to take off time or reconfigure your schedule, that way you know, I'm going to take 2-3 days off and I'll get back to it, and your brain will feed back off of that and reinforce the behavior versus holding this high standard that you know you can attain.
Because if you go on a diet, that there's a start and an end. But if you change your lifestyle, it should be sustainable.
Exactly.
And chronic dieting too, it can lead you to comorbidities, right? So if you're a chronic dieter, you'll find that you end up gaining fat in your stomach. And that stomach fat versus everywhere else, that's a pretty good indicator of your risk for a cardiac event. So you're not meant to be like starving and then refueling yourself. Refueling,
you're not.
Binging, going back and forth.
Now, the problem with fad diets and fitness fads is that we like to do things that are simple, the least resistance. That's how our brains are just wired. And as people, we don't want to spend a lot of time to get the result we want. Now, in theory, that makes sense, but what comes easy in life? It typically doesn't take a few days to get out of shape. So why would people expect it to take a few days to get back into it? Now, a lot of times we get overwhelmed with options. We see so many different things. We do cardio, do we strength, do we cardio and strength, do we do Zumba, do we do water aerobics, do we do cross? There's so many choices nowadays. Before, it was pretty straightforward what to do for fitness, but now since there's so much choice, we get overloaded, and this bias makes our brain think what to do. So we either choose nothing at all, or we choose easier routes that may not be as beneficial. And in the long term, you might get a little result, because usually when people do these fads, they're newbies, meaning anything they'll change their homeostasis or their body's balance is going to make a difference. Because if you never really were that active, your body's going to adapt very quickly. You're going to be like, hey, I lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks. And this is because most of it was either water weight, or you're so untrained that your deficit of working out to food intake being drastically reduced and increased physically is going to make a big difference. But what happens after a month? It plateaus, and now you're doing the same things and going back to that illusion of choice. You have so many things, you're not going to change it up. You're not going to understand it, because you're just going to choose that fad diet or that fad fitness routine, and you're going to keep repeating it, and your body's going to adapt to it. That's just how we're built. Now, when we go too restrictive on the other end of that, it gets to the point where our body has to maintain, but there's nothing to use. And this is called allostasis, because when there's not enough, it has to break down that energy from somewhere. And it's going to start breaking down from your actual tissue. She mentions about belly fat. That happens because when you're in a severe deficit, you're putting your body in a deprived mode. So it needs to store energy, and what it does, it breaks down your muscle tissue, which is what you want. and it stores it in the belly for later because your internal organs are located there. So therefore it's protecting you, but in the end you see a number change lower on the scale and you think you've done something, but in actuality you get something called skinny fat, or if you want to be more PC, metabolically obese normal weight. So this is when your body loses physical mass, but it doesn't look as tight or toned as you would like it. This is why these fitness fads and diets are not good. They're only gonna give you short-term benefits with long-term problems. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. It was great going over the Real Fem Sapiens videos. Once again, check out her page. She has some great content. I follow her also on Instagram. She puts great stuff out there. She actually has a background in anthropology, so being in the psychology field, those two overlap all the time. So make sure you go follow her, but also like, comment, and subscribe to this video. Now, as always, thanks for letting me break it down and get your mind right.